Before we begin this Sunday evening address, if you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscription button now and hit the notification bell. That way you can be told when new videos drop. Also, if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. That happens more than you would think. And also hit the like button. The white supremacists hate that. Now, that said, up until now, the black celebrities have made it a point to be cheerleaders for this or that political party and nothing more. None of them were actually demanding anything from the candidates. Why, you had none other than Puff Dummy, P. Dimwit, P. Diddy. This clown was running around saying vote or die, but he wasn't saying what to vote for. There was no policy being put forward. Just vote. Don't bother thinking, just vote or die. That was as far as his political thinking, such as it was, went. But now what's happened is, and we've seen this latest example with Charlamagne the fraud, that these individuals who used to get away with giving empty proclamations and declarations that black people just need to vote, without actually having to justify that action, now that the black media has begun a new type of political discourse, one that previously didn't exist. Now what's happening is all these old black fakers, frauds, phonies, and fools are being forced to change their tune. Not because they want to, because they see what's happening at the grassroots of the black soil. They see what's happening with the rank and file black people in this country. They see that you have the former slaves who have decided that we're going to get on code. The black folks whose bloodline goes back to the killing fields of the American South. We are speaking in our own voice, standing in our own power, and we're making demands. Demands that are going to require white supremacy to relinquish its power because we're coming to take it. You ain't got to give it up. We're coming to take it. And as a result, what you have is, just to try to keep up the facade of relevance, these old crusty Negroes who the white media put on, now they're trying to talk tough. Joe Biden, for about the umpteenth time, put his foot in his mouth saying, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. This clown, clearly he was coached on this garbage from Simone Sanders or some other unthinking Negro he's got on the payroll. Isn't Karine Jean-Pierre, isn't she supposed to be one of his shills now, one of his new bed wenches that he put on the payroll? Isn't that the case? So he's got the incompetent operative class among the black bootlicks who are feeding him these asinine talking points, and it just makes the situation worse because what they have decided is we're going to stick to our strategy, our policy that you don't actually promise black people anything. You just tell black people vote for you and how you care about black people and why no one's done more for black people than me. Well, we're talking about tangibles over here. Why black people? I like black people so much. Whoa, what about my tangibles? We're talking about the tangibles. Well, tangibles, we can talk about that later, but right now you need to know that nobody's a better friend to you that see they're trying to talk us to death and talk around our issues. And you've had people like Charlamagne the fraud who previously had been the handmaidens to this political policy, covering for these guys, letting them get away with it. Yeah, but now what's happened is the black media is on the block. After 13 years or so of working in the vineyards, we have finally achieved critical mass. Now we have reached enough black people where the message gets out and about and it can't be ignored anymore. We have leapfrogged the white media filter. And these black bootlicks in the employ of the left arm, political arm of white supremacy, now here they are trying to keep their sugar daddies afloat. Do not think that Charlamagne was sticking up for black folks. He wasn't. He's just trying to remain relevant, just like P. Dimwit. These guys have never spoken in specifics. They've never done anything other than rah, 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 sis, boom, bah, vote or die. Now they're trying to pretend like there's some sort of armchair political scientist. Not even. You see, the only reason that people are talking about Joe Biden's disastrous interview with Charlamagne the fraud is because the black grassroots have been able to speak loud enough to be heard. We've made our presence felt. The white media cannot deny it anymore. They've been trying to, but it ain't been working. So this week what we've had is we've had the charges against Kenneth Walker provisionally dismissed. The DA forced to have to do that because he saw the war chest that was being built up and he understood, man, if they're putting $250,000 on this guy's books just to help him fight this case, that means I'm facing a grassroots effort here that's going to neutralize the state's taxpayer coffers. That's right. Just because you have the taxpayer coffers to work from doesn't make you invincible. He realized that there was real grassroots support. People were supporting this guy at the street level, and that tells you this is the jury pool. This is the pool of voters and pool of citizens that you're going to have to try to find a jury from, and they're already saying we think this guy's innocent. So the DA's going, I might want to wait. Let this guy's popularity cool off a little bit. So white supremacy took an L on that one. And now you got Joe Biden deciding I can use some of Simone Sanders' handcrafted talking points for all the good it did him. But the reason that it's been so damaging to him is because the white media understands the black media has been shaping the minds of black people when it comes to politics. 13 years ago, I said that we were going to take control of the social discourse within the black community. And now we have. Charlamagne the fraud and his clown posse over there with the breakfast schlubs, they've had to change what they have said. We haven't been shucking and jiving. Usually that's all he's good for. Shucking and jiving and up here laughing and giggling and let's make some jokes. That's fun. Let's talk about some gumbo and hot sauce. That's what Charlamagne the fraud's been about. Now he's trying to act serious. He wants people to take him seriously. Keep dreaming. But this is what's happened to the incompetent operative class. This is what's happened to the black bootlicks that the white media propped up. Now, Joe Biden, of course, he's not going to be talking about anything serious, but I think you need to be reminded of who and what Joe Biden really is. Because the white media, they've decided to do a CYA maneuver, but when it comes to Joe Biden, well, they have to keep up appearances. Sure, to cover themselves, they'll say, well, we talked about Joe Biden and the 94 crime bill, and we're done with that. We're done with that. Yeah, well, the black media isn't done with that. Joe Biden has a decades-long record of anti-black racism. This guy has been a proud Yankee Confederate his entire life. Ever since this man got into public office, he has been waging a nonstop war against black people. You can go all the way back to the freaking 70s when he decided that he was making it clear, I don't want my kids to be in some sort of school jungle, talking about the black kids. Apparently that's what makes a school a jungle if the black kids are there. Well, we got to keep these schools all white, don't you know? And as far as the black ones go, well, we're not going to talk about funding for these black schools, and I'm damn sure not going to be getting funding for these black schools. Instead, it's going to be a matter of, well, just keep the niggers in their own schools, and we're not going to do any funding, mind you, because that's been the entire problem. The problem was funding. But Joe Biden wasn't talking about that. Now, Charlamagne, just to cover himself, he decided that he would mention one or two of the laws that Joe Biden happened to stick up for because he knew that the black media was going to be all over him, so he felt like he was forced to. He didn't want to, mind you, because he's trying to stay in these guys' good graces. Because if nothing else, just believe, just like Simone Mammy Sanders, Charlamagne the fraud is also hoping maybe he can get a government post one day. Maybe if he plays his cards right and doesn't tick any of them off, he doesn't offend them too much, well, maybe he can get himself a cable show or something. That's what he's angling for. So he understands you can't delegitimize and you cannot discredit and tear these guys apart. So you got to tiptoe around it. So he's playing the game, but the black media doesn't. I won't. He did mention the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984, but he didn't tell you what it was. He just mentioned it in passing. First of all, it was sponsored and introduced by Senator Strom Thurmond. Now, nobody should be voting for a damn thing that's got Strom Thurmond's name on it. But just keep in mind that one of the first co-sponsors of it happened to be none other than Joe Biden. In fact, he was actually the very first co-sponsor of it. So he couldn't wait to go ahead and back up Strom Thurmond. Because after all, as a good northern white supremacist, Joe Biden understood exactly what the so-called Crime Control Act was about. First thing that the Crime Control Act did was it repealed the Bail Reform Act of 1966. The Bail Reform Act of 66, that was a law that Congress passed that made it where if you were on trial for a non-capital offense, you had the right to be released pending trial on your own personal recognizance. The only way that they can enact a personal bond is if a judicial officer determined that basically there might be a problem. But otherwise, if they caught you with some drugs or something, as long as it was a non-capital offense, you could be released ROR. But the thing is, Strom Thurmond and Joe Biden were putting together their idea that there was going to be a whole raft of legislation, that piece by piece they were going to put in place an anti-black incarceration state. These laws were going to be targeted at black people. In first order of business, once they arrest you, there's not going to be any sort of release pending trial if you're black. Keep in mind, this is just a matter of making where they can point and say, well, this is all legal. That's the point, to give the facade of legality to it. But that's one of the things that the Comprehensive Crime Control Act did. What it did was it made it where now you got people who, for non-capital offenses, and non-capital when it comes to black people is usually low-level drug charges. Well, now we're going to go ahead and put these guys in a cage, and that's the entire point. That was the entire point. It's very difficult to aid in your own defense when you happen to be behind bars. But this is to stack the deck against black people who are accused of a crime. And Joe Biden voted for that. But another thing that the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of '84 did was Strom Thurmond and a lot of those good old boys have been trying to find a way to legally rob people. What, you think that all of that property that the police take, that basically it goes somewhere to be sold at auction? Hell no, what happens is they keep it. So asset forfeiture was largely expanded upon and largely augmented through this law. That's basically state-sanctioned theft. So if you're black, then go ahead and just come up to you, take what you got, and tell you be on your way if you know what's good for you. That is assuming that they haven't already decided to bring some sort of phony baloney trumped-up charges against you. But this is what Joe Biden voted for as early as 1984. This is what Joe Biden was on. This guy was already beginning his murderous jihad against black people to turbocharge a prison industrial anti-black complex. And lest I forget, I think it also bears noting that Edward Kennedy was also somebody who decided that he would sign on to be a co-sponsor for the Comprehensive Crime Control Act. And no, I don't think that he was on one of his famous booze-induced benders when he decided to sign on to this one. I don't think that he had one too many and didn't know what he was signing on to that day. Edward Kennedy, the liberal from Massachusetts, the liberal lion. Yeah, he's lying all right, that's for sure. So you have a Yankee Confederate and a Yankee liberal both on the exact same page and backing the same legislation as a notorious dyed-in-the-wool, die-hard white supremacist Southern Confederate scumbag. Yeah, Strom Thurmond and Edward Kennedy on the same page for legislation. When it comes to black people, there is no difference between your right-wing white supremacist or your left-wing white supremacist. There is no conservative or liberal when it comes to black people. These white supremacists, be they from the north or the south, they're on the same page when it comes to us, no matter what they claim their ideological affiliations happen to be. Oh, they have minor doctrinal differences with one another, but as soon as you bring up the issue of black people, all that fades away. There is neither light nor air between them when it comes to going after us. And then, of course, just a couple of years later, this guy couldn't even wait a full Senate term. It's like as soon as he got that passed, all right, then here comes the next one. Now you got another one of these good old white supremacists, Robert Dole from Kansas. Gee, anybody remember all the anti-black lynchings and murders took place in Kansas? Bob Dole does. Hell, for all we know, he probably took part in them. But Bob Dole, he was the one who put forward the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. And as you see, just like before, the usual suspects who were the chief co-sponsors of it, Robert Byrd, Strom Thurmond, and Joe Biden. Did Charlamagne decide to corner him about that? If he did, he blew by it at 1,000,000 miles an hour like he did the '84 Comprehensive Crime Control Act. We're doing the Cliff Notes version of it. Go ahead and just give me a soundbite, Joe, and we'll move on. You ain't gonna get pressed about it. But the '86 Anti-Drug Abuse Act, that's the law that created the 100-to-1 sentencing disparity between crack cocaine and powdered cocaine. So you wonder what piece of legislation was it that did that? That was it, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. And Joe Biden was an eager co-sponsor for it. So you see, anything that happens to turbocharge the anti-black prison industrial complex, Joe Biden has been the first one online going, when do I vote for it? How do I okay, man, Bob Dole beat me to the punch. He put the legislation up there before I could. Well, I'm going to damn sure be a co-sponsor. I'm not just going to wait to vote for it. I want to be a co-sponsor. I want my name on this. I'm going to help you drive this down the throats of the American people. That's what Joe Biden was doing back in '86. You see, Joe Biden's crimes against Black America, they go back decades, and it's a hell of a lot more than just busing. He was one of the main architects of the anti-Black incarceration state that exists. And he worked arm in arm, lockstep, with the most notorious segregationist racist that he could. He made it a point that anything you guys want, I'm backing it. If there was any legislation that would be advantageous for Black people, well, he wasn't sure how he felt about that, but he was sure how he felt about making sure that there was a prison cell for every Black man, woman, and child in America. That much he was sure about. He is the unabashed, avowed enemy of Black America, not because I say so, but because his putrid legislative record proves so. Every time you see some segregationist putting forward some legislation, here comes Joe Biden like a loyal hound dog going, please, let me I want to put my name on it too. I want to put my stamp on it too. I know if you get sick or you can't make it to the Senate floor, I'll be there to go ahead and champion this because I sure want to help. That's Joe Biden, who is now running from his record. He's running from the '86 Anti-Drug Abuse Act. That was the main piece of legislation that made it where even though the rate of drug abuse between blacks and whites was the same, Black people were only 12% of drug users, which was a smaller percentage of the population than we were at that time. And yet, when you looked at who was getting arrested, hemmed up, put on trial, and convicted, it was mostly Black people. This is a license to have color-coded laws. If you happen to have a particular area of activity that you think Blacks are predominantly involved in, then you criminalize that. But if you got an area that's all white, like, say, meth abuse, well, we're not writing any laws about that. It ain't going to be no comprehensive crime control act involving methamphetamines. There's not going to be a 2020 Anti-Drug Abuse Act involving methamphetamines. Oh, there's damn sure not going to be a 2020 crime bill that Joe Biden's going to push. Oh, all of a sudden, it's a public health issue. Yeah, because it's involving white people. Well, what about all the Black people in jail then? Time for some legislation that lets them go so that we can have one standard for everyone. Well, that's very complicated, you see. It involves a lot of debate, you see. Very complicated. Oh, we've been trying for years, don't you know? Now, I'd like to know, has Charlamagne the Fraud been talking about that? Has P. Dimwit been talking about that? Or have they been doing a blink and you'll miss it, just bring it up one time to cover our butts so that the Black media can't say, well, you never mentioned it. Oh, we mentioned it, y'all. And then you just scamper off like a cockroach when the lights come on. Is that more like what they did? And who can forget the 1994 crime bill? Or should I say Biden's law? Who can forget about that? Well, apparently Joe Biden did. He seems to have forgotten all about it. This dude's caught a case of convenient amnesia. He's forgotten all about the 94 crime bill. He's not sure who wrote it. He's not sure what year it was put on the books. He's not even sure what was in it, but he does know that all that stuff that Black folks don't like, it certainly wasn't him that put it in there. I mean, sure, he wrote the legislation. He's just not sure how all that stuff got in there. But he does know that he didn't approve of. Well, there were things that were in that bill that he didn't necessarily like and didn't necessarily approve of and didn't necessarily object to either. Can you see any time when Joe Biden looked and said, wait a minute, I'm withdrawing this legislation? Or I got to stop this legislation because you're putting all sorts of stuff in here that's going to make it where whatever good I claim this law is going to have, well, it's going to be doing a lot more harm than good. He didn't do that. Instead, it's a matter of he was praising it. Back then, he would correct you real quick. If you didn't call it Biden's law, he would correct you. The 94 crime bill was Biden's law. He was proud of it. Beating his chest like Tarzan, strutting around like a peacock. Oh, he was only too proud to take credit for the 94 crime bill. Biden's law indeed. He was proud of it. Now, when it comes to the 94 crime bill, the Black media's been out here beating the drum more than anybody else. And we've been out here making sure that people are educated on exactly how Biden's law turbocharged the prison industrial complex. And we already preempted the lie that we knew that they were going to tell. We knew that they were going to try to claim, well, it was the states, you see. You can't blame that on Joe Biden. It was the states. The reason that people started getting locked up was the states. The states wanted to do that. The part that they leave out, of course, is that Joe Biden wrote into his Biden's law a $12.5 billion bag of money to the states if they harshened their laws, made them more strident, made them stricter, more draconian, and made it where people were made to serve out all of their sentences no matter how minor their crimes were. Joe Biden was the one who put draconian, deliberately targeting black people statutes on the books. He made it where the federal guidelines were going to be made as harsh as possible. And then he waved a bag full of $12.5 billion in front of the states and said, if you guys change your laws so that they're as harsh and as racist as mine, I'll give you a piece of this $12.5 billion bag. And as the Brennan Center reported, between 1995 and 1999, you had 9 states who changed their laws so as to comply with Joe Biden's law, to comply with his guidelines. And then you had another 21 states who changed their laws, all so they could get the funding. By 1999, by the end of the century, only 5 years after Biden's law was enacted, 42 states had changed their laws to put them in compliance with Biden's law. When Simone Mammy Sanders was questioned about that by Victor what's-his-name on CNN, she didn't have an answer for that. She tried to play that game, the states, but at least Victor checked her on that. But that's the last time CNN's brought that up, by the way. They were doing a CYA maneuver, so don't expect them to be bringing that up in the future. But the black media will. But Joe Biden was asked about that by Charlamagne, and, well, he's had the exact same answer. It was the states, you see, the states. And what was Charlamagne's response to that? Weak sauce. Basically let him go on it. But $12.5 billion, that's how much of American taxpayers' money, black taxpayers' money, that Joe Biden confiscated and gave to the states if they would just start locking black people up. Because the states were looking and going, hey, we're strapped for cash. Unlike the federal government, we don't have the right to print money or to be going into massive debt, so we don't have the money on hand for this. And Joe Biden's like, well, how lucky for you. The federal government does have the power to print money and take out debts and such, and that being the case, we'll stake you on it. Just tell us how much you need to build those prisons to lock black people up, and we'll go ahead and hook you up. All you got to do is change the laws so we can all be on the same page. Make your laws as harsh as the ones I put on the books. But Joe Biden seems to have forgotten about that. Now he's trying to deny everything. $12.5 billion. You can buy a lot of anti-black hostility for that kind of money. That's how much federal money Joe Biden gave to the states if they would change their laws to match Biden's law. You know, when you offer politicians billions of dollars in order to induce and incentivize them to write legislation you want, they got a term for that. It's called a bribe. But of course, if you're bribing one politician to change his vote, $10,000 is usually all it takes. However, if you're trying to bribe an entire nation, just 50 states, to change their laws, well, you may have to break them off a few billion to do that one. And he did. He had no problem with it. And by the way, Congress had no problem with it. Nobody was looking and asking, where's all the money going to come from? Hey, when it comes to locking black people up, there is no bill that's too high for that. Now, one of the main defenses that Biden tries to offer for Biden's law and why I had to put the harshest laws imaginable on the books is because crime was out of control. Crime was everywhere. These niggers were on a rampage. Crime was everywhere and someone had to do something. Well, as the Brennan Center documented, crime had already started declining years before Biden's law. One of the lies he tries to tell is, well, but it did bring crime down. Yes, it was draconian. Yes, it was harsh, but it worked. That's the lie that he tries to tell, and that Simone Mammy Sanders tried to tell. Well, harsh as it was, it did work. That's supposed to appeal to the casual racist, read white moderates, those white liberals who were cut from the same cloth as Jim Crow Joe Biden. That's what that kind of talk's supposed to do. Well, we know some of you might look and go, well, Joe, that was a little hard, a little wrong what you did, but okay, but look at it in the abstract. Yes, it was harsh, but it was also effective. I mean, it worked. You gotta break some niggers' heads. I mean, break some eggs to make the omelet, right? But the facts, of course, are that crime was already in decline well before Biden's law had been enacted. Crime had already dropped 10% overall, and violent crime had decreased by 5%. And crime continued to fall. It's just like with stop and frisk. You had people like Mike Bloomberg and Rudy Giuliani. You stop us from being able to stop these niggers on the streets, and why crime will be out of control. After stop and frisk was taken away, the crime continued to drop, showing it had nothing to do with it. It was not a factor. You had the best controlled scientific experiment you could ask for. So if Joe Biden tries to use the lie, and he will, he and Simone, Mamie Sanders, and Karine Jean-Pierre, a lot of these folk who've been talking tough when they're in front of us, trying to talk about, mass incarceration and how wrong it was, they're going to become the biggest apologists for Joe Biden, the biggest cheerleaders for the 94 crime bill you ever saw. Expect to see them go ahead and show their true colors. White supremacy has let them know you're going to be our mascot. You're going to be able to strut around and pretend like you're a big shot for a little while. And they're going to be out there defending Biden's law and telling black folks that we shouldn't be worked up about it. But the facts is, no matter what Joe Biden or his black sock puppets try to tell you, Biden's law was not effective. It didn't do anything other than give a framework for mass incarceration of black people. That it did do. But as far as reducing crime, crime was already in decline before Biden's law. Biden's law had nothing to do with it. The 94 crime bill didn't reduce a damn thing. Well, what it did reduce was the number of free black people. But as far as crime goes, didn't change anything. In fact, it actually made crime worse, because now what happened was you had a bunch of black folks being stuffed into prison. The prisons became overflooded almost immediately. So while it was good that you could have an excuse for taking black people off the voter rolls, because others of Joe Biden's ideological ilk had put laws on the books saying if you get convicted of a felony, you lose your right to vote in this state. So Joe Biden had a nice warm feeling that, we got these niggers aren't going to be a factor in politics anymore. So he was happy with that. Sure. But as far as crime goes, no, Joe Biden did not do anything that affected crime whatsoever, except for probably make it worse. But of course, you're not going to have Jim Crow making any mea culpas for that. And of course, bootlicks like Charlamagne are not going to bring that up either. I don't know if Charlamagne's merely ignorant of the facts or he doesn't care, but one's the same as the other. So you understand the subtle manipulation when you got these people, especially black people, pretending to interview Joe Biden, and they're letting him get away with all of these lies and dodges and treating it as if it's basically valid, that his answers are basically valid. We're not going to be saying you're wrong or going, wait a minute, we got the facts we got receipts. You're going to go ahead and put on a show. We promise not to ask any tough questions, and our follow-ups will be completely worthless, and you go ahead and give your pre-canned stock answer talking point, and we'll nod our heads seriously and move on to the next question. But you see that people were giving Charlamagne's little performance thumbs down. That's the 94 crime bill. Biden's law. And Charlamagne didn't take him to task. Then again, there's no sense kvetching about that. That's not Charlamagne's job. Of course, Charlamagne was going to give him the soft glove treatment. What do you expect? But you better not give him the soft glove treatment. You better understand exactly what Joe Biden's crimes are. He is an unrepentant anti-black racist, always has been. He deliberately set up the 86 Anti-Drug Abuse Act to be color-coded, just like Biden's law is. When it comes to drugs, this bastard does not give a two-bit damn about drugs at all. He could care less about that. All you got to do, as I reported on for you last year, I gave you the whole rundown about Joe Biden's whole stinking family, especially his kids. Hunter Biden, that little junkie. That dude, he's had several relapses, several bouts of drug abuse, several of them. So many people just stopped keeping count. It wasn't even worth keeping count anymore. Back in 2014, when Barack Obama was making some half-baked attempt to try to stick up for the police helping them kill black people, while that was going on, very quietly, Joe Biden's ignorant little boy Hunter got himself booted out of the Navy. And by the way, he had only been in the Navy for like a couple of years. He was 43 when he enlisted, and that was because Joe Biden was his father, vice president's your father, so you get to have a vanity post in the Navy. He was like some sort of public relations officer in the Navy. He just wanted to be able to put on a suit and do some cosplay. I was in the Navy. Look at me. I'm wearing a Navy uniform, and I've served my country. I put on this nation's uniform. When you're white, this is what they let you get away with. He got all kinds of waivers. When you're in your 40s, you're not supposed to be actually applying for that, but you get waivers. And if you're the vice president's boy, especially Joe Biden's kid, he doesn't have mind bending some laws and bending some rules. And speaking of bending, you had Hunter Biden, instead of him going to prison, which is where he should have gone, instead of him getting prosecuted, they just said, well, we're going to go ahead and boot you out and call it a day. Sorry, you got to give up those Navy anchors that you're wearing. Sorry, that we can't have it. You got found out. But Hunter Biden's had all kinds of run-ins. Go ahead and look in the archives of this YouTube channel. I did a whole rundown about it. Hunter Biden and how he got allegedly caught in Arizona with a crack pipe and such, and Joe Biden's not being tough on drugs when it comes to him. So it seems methamphetamine is not the only racially protected narcotic in America. It's not a matter of the drug being racially protected. It's the people doing the drugs who are racially protected. But it wasn't just Hunter Biden. You also had Joe Biden's daughter, one of his daughters, Ashley Biden. Well, she likes to smoke the wacky tobacco from time to time. And you know she's been doing some stuff more than that. Even in this photo, she's got the pinpoint pupils. She looks like she's in a freaking fog. She's not really sure where she's at. Weed, wild parties, yeah. Oh, you gotta love those Biden family values, don't you? You gotta love it. These are the kids who Joe Biden raised. A bunch of junkies, and yet for some damn reason, you don't see him looking and going, that 86 Anti-Drug Abuse Act, man, what a mistake that was. Biggest regret of my political career, because now that my kids are all being strung out on every type of narcotic there is, I think I understand now how wrong I was, and well, I'm going to be spending the rest of my days trying to live this down. Nope, he's had no regrets about it. No regrets whatsoever. Only time that he even talks just pretending to be contrite about it is whenever black people question him on it. That's only because he's seeking higher office. If Joe Biden had decided that he was going to retire, you wouldn't be hearing him say anything. He'd be saying, well, you niggers just didn't understand. Let me tell you how out of control you niggers are. And these are just the facts. But because he wants to be president, it's a matter of he's doing the same thing Bill Clinton did for Hillary. He's trying to blame black people for it. Well, it wasn't even my idea. Why? You had these black preachers and these black civic types, and they put a gun to my head, and they told me they would kill me unless I wrote this law, and I had to go argue for it. And it was their idea. They wanted it. They were the ones who wanted it. He's hoping desperately that that's going to wash, and it won't. But when Joe Biden talks about drugs, he doesn't lead with, hey, both my son and my daughter are junkies. And I feel so ashamed of all the legislation that I put on the books, because now that I got junkies in my own kids, and now that my progeny are a bunch of freaking dope fiends, now I understand exactly how much harm I was doing, why these guys have never gotten sent to prison. And hey, it's because A, they're my kids, and B, more importantly, because they're white. You have never heard Joe Biden stand before anyone and say, hey, I understand exactly how wrong my legislation was, because my kids have not at all been made to pay for their own drug crimes, and it's because A, they're white. And as white people, well, the judge is going to be lenient. The police are going to be reluctant to arrest you. The DA is going to refuse to prosecute. And the judge is going to be saying, you need to be in treatment. You don't need a prison cell. And I understand now that I've seen it firsthand. Nope, as far as Joe Biden's concerned, he ain't bringing that up. Joe Biden has spent his entire life calling himself wagging his finger at black people. Joe Biden has made a career out of calling himself lecturing black people about things. This guy who can't even keep his kids off the pipe. He can't keep his two little delinquents off the happy powder. Can't keep them off the wacky tobacco. Oh, but he's going to lecture black people about cleaning up the black community. He needs to start with his own home first. But remember in 2007 when he was running for vice president with Barack Obama?
I spent last summer going through the black sections of my town, holding rallies in parks, trying to get black men to understand it's not unmanly to wear a condom, getting women to understand they can say no, getting people in the position where testing matters.
It's not unmanly to wear a condom. I'm trying to get black men to understand it's not unmanly to wear a condom. Yeah, because there's nothing like some white guy with a couple of strung out dope fiend kids to inspire the black community. And we definitely need to have some white bigots telling us about condom use, right? Because white America, they believe in using condoms religiously. He said this in 2007. Does anyone remember who Biden and Obama were running against in 2007? Sarah Palin was trying to become vice president of the United States, and she had a freaking hockey team full of kids. God only knows who the real fathers were, and popping out more of them on the campaign trail. At least her daughter was. Well, there's always been scuttlebutt about that, but that's the thing, man. She's got the freaking Brady Bunch produced all on her own, but Joe Biden's telling black folks about wearing condoms. This woman had complete and thorough contempt for the use of condoms, but she was seeking the presidency. This woman's trying to set a Guinness World Record, but Joe Biden's trying to tell black people about wearing condoms. And her daughter, it is believed, had a child, and Sarah Palin's trying to claim that it was hers. I mean, this is what was going on with the other side of the political aisle at that time, but Joe Biden's lecturing black people. It's not unmanly to wear a condom. I'm trying to get black men to understand it's not unmanly to wear a condom. Well, before you can tell anybody about manhood, Joe, you got to be one first, and you don't qualify. You're not even talking about sending his little brats to prison. You're just talking about, hey, don't you think you ought to make a clean breast of things and go ahead and tell the nation that you raised a couple of drug addicts and that it's amazing how they're not in prison and how we understand that the laws are stridently, horrifically anti-black and racist, not merely in their form, but also in their application. And that this proves that you cannot be president. At this point here, you need to just be begging black people's forgiveness 24/7. Forget about running for president. You're not fit to be president. You're not fit to be dog catcher. See, this is something that you're not going to be hearing from the white media or their black bootlicks. And as for Simone Mammy Sanders, the white supremacist, they can only stand to see one, maybe two Negroes around them at most. How many times have you seen Mammy Sanders in Joe Biden's presence, huh? Jim Crow Joe can't stand seeing her around. So as far as he's concerned, I'll do one or two appearances with her so you can't say that I never was in her presence, but after that, keep her away from me. By the way, that's why the competition among the bootlicks to see which one of them will get one of those coveted team mascot positions is so vicious. That's what these clowns are for. They want to be white supremacy's team mascot. And that's the reason why when Joe Biden does this mess, you're not seeing Mammy Sanders calling him on it. You had Jamel Hill trying to do some, oh, y'all just blowing it out of proportion. Yeah, you can tell the Miss Meal cramps are getting to her. She wants her job back at ESPN. I guess she figured she was going to get some other job somewhere else and it didn't materialize. Oh, yeah, the Negroes who basically put all their chips on the white media, you can tell when they're out here campaigning for another job, for another make-work job from some white media company. You had a lot of Negroes who showed their true colors. Oh, I can't be saying nothing about Joe Biden. Yeah, he was wrong, but I got to decide. Oh, you made your decision, and it was the wrong one. But of course, no idiot jamboree would be complete without Jonathan Sweetenlow Capehart. That clown's out here. He's got his skinny jeans on, extra tight. And saying, oh, you guys know that Joe Biden just meant that in jest. Ain't that amazing? Stacey Abrams, by the way, you know somewhere she's drooling and thinking, oh, Joe Biden, now you need to pick a black woman to be your running mate after this. You need to pick a black woman. And if you pick me, I'll make all the excuses for your racism that you want. Why, I'll defend you to the death. I'll defend your racism to my dying breath. You know, that's what Stacey Abrams is about. You know, she was probably sending text messages to Joe Biden going, Joe Biden, you're in a fix. And I'll get you out of it. Simone Sanders, she won't lick your boots or any other part of you as much as I would. And you really need me on this. And I'll be your doormat, whatever you want. Yeah, you got a cottage industry of Negroes who are trying to figure out how to position themselves, but Joe Biden keeps making it more and more difficult. Not that that's going to dampen their enthusiasm for him. They know what their job is. White daddy goes ahead and spews his racist bile, and they go ahead and do some bootlick splaining for him. They do some coon splaining for him. Well, what he meant was it was all a joke. Now, keep in mind, white supremacy has always tried to cover up its anti-black racism, to go ahead and use the thin end of the wedge as a joke, to claim it's a joke as a means of getting their foot in the door. Even Richard Spencer talked about that. Alt-right leader and white supremacist extraordinaire Richard Spencer talked about that. If they sit here and accuse you of racism, just go ahead and tell them it was a joke. Tell them that you were only kidding. Yeah, because they know that they're not kidding. So just understand the whole Charlamagne the fraud interview for what it was. Is the white media trying to find a way to circumvent the black media, the black grassroots. Some of you get frustrated that Charlamagne went light on him. What the hell you expect? There's no sense in you getting bent out of shape about it. That's the reason why Joe Biden's talking to him. That's the reason why Biden's talking to him. These guys clearly had it set up just like with Donna Brazile and Roly Poly with Hillary Clinton. You know, they're sitting here, we're going to go easy on you. We're going to stick to some predetermined parameters. I promise. Whatever it is you don't want to talk about, we won't. I'm just going to give you a chance to throw you some softballs and let you hit them out of the park. Don't worry. We're going to go real easy on you. We ain't going to do no damage. Don't worry about it. That's what it was about. It was a set-up stage production. Of course it was. Joe Biden's trying to inoculate himself against what he knows the black media has been saying and is going to continue to say. He was indirectly responding to us the entire time. Everything that we've been saying, it's been sticking to him because the black bootlicks haven't been able to distract you because the black media won't let you be distracted. You guys have been signal boosting what's been said here. It's made it out there, and now he's got to deal with it. And he can't hang. And you know Simone Sanders is quaking in her boots. She's wondering where the hell her next plate of butter biscuits is coming from, because the truth of the matter is they want these black bootlicks to do one thing and one thing only. You're supposed to prove that you can hoodwink all these Negroes. And if the only thing you're bringing to the table is, I've got some sorority ties and these boule organizations, well, clearly that ain't where the power's at. These guys aren't influencing anything. The reason that they put a Corinne Jean-Pierre on the payroll is to be a black face to go ahead and be a shameless apologist for Joe Biden's anti-black racism. That's the entire reason that they're on the payroll. They serve no other purpose. You damn sure don't hire them for their brains. That's obvious. After the humiliation that Mamie Sanders suffered on CNN when she tried to use the Biden's law was not his fault. The incarceration was because of the states. After that, they should have been trying to figure out what we need a better talking point. Hell, we need a talking point. We ain't got one. We got beat like a drum, and we're gonna get bludgeoned to death, and we don't have some sort of answer for this. But there ain't no answer. The black media knows all the tricks. And you're not getting away with it. And you won't be able to get some handkerchief-headed fool that you found on some New York DJ station. You're not going to get him out there to run interference for you either. It's a brand new day. So a lot of people are getting put on notice. Joe Biden thinks he's going to get out in front of this and he'll be able to try to say, well, I already addressed that, fool. This ain't about you addressing it. When we say punishment for the white supremacists, Joe Biden's on that list too. He's not going to be allowed to sit here and put the most aggressive anti-black incarceration state in human history in position in place and sit here to the tune of billions of dollars, basically putting a bounty on black people, incentivizing and paying you to lock black people up. And then he's going to sit here and say, let me become president. Now forget that. People are getting held accountable because the black media is doing it. We're in the driver's seat. And you're not going to be running to some safe, approved of Negroes who are going to let you get away with spouting the talking points and then move on as if nothing had happened. That's what we got with Big Bird. He had his little phony baloney pretend interview with Kamala Harris. And what a surprise. He brought up reparations one time in passing. All she said was, I'm in favor of reparations. He didn't ask anything else after that. And he was like, okay, that's done. This is supposed to be what qualifies as a reparations advocate. See, they're hoping that punks like Charlamagne are going to be an antidote to the black media. They're hoping. And here he is trying to call himself, yeah, you can't dodge the black media like that. You're damn right. What a shame that Charlamagne's not part of it. Charlamagne doesn't know what white supremacists he wants to snuggle up to. If he's not trying to get close to clowns like Tommy Lauren, he's trying to get close to Jim Crow Joe Biden. This fool's all over the place. He don't know if he's coming or going. And on a side note, well, we already know that Jonathan Capehart, he happens to be part of the alphabet community. And it's just a fact that apparently, I guess he looks at Joe Biden as being more than presidential material. I guess that when it comes to age, old Jonathan Capehart doesn't discriminate. And you got to wonder if maybe Charlamagne happens to be on the team too. You got to wonder. I guess Barack Obama's not the only one who's trying to keep some secrets in the closet. But the black media is in firm control. We are influencing presidential elections as we should be. If black people are going to get what we want, first thing we got to show is, as I've been pointing out, we have to show that we can punish white supremacists for their transgressions against us. And we will not have come into our own until we start punishing the white supremacists and demonstrating that we can do so. We already flexed on the white supremacists in Louisville, and now we're flexing on Joe Biden. He's being made to account. He doesn't want to. His black bootlicks are trying to run interference for him, and it just isn't working. He should have been able to go ahead and do 1 or 2 throwaway appearances with one of the usual suspects, and that should have been the end of it. But it's not. It's not going away, and they realize this isn't coming from the Republicans. This isn't coming from some right-wing element. In other words, it's not coming from one of their friends, one of their colleagues. When it comes to politics in America, when it comes to black people, there's no left or right. It's just the polite white supremacists versus the rude white supremacists. So they usually look and go, okay, Republicans, we all have the same goal. We have some minor rhetorical differences, but that's a little bit of variance just to fool the plebes. But they're realizing, hold on here. These demands for tangibles, people shaking things up, this isn't coming from one of our usual friends. I can't call up somebody over at the Claremont Institute or over at George Soros's house, and all we got to do is find out who it is and tell them you got to lay off a little bit. Somebody's a little bit off the reservation. No, this is coming from a different quarter altogether, and we can't stop it. We can't get out in front of it. We can't preempt it. We can't insulate it. We can't contain it. That's what they're hoping to do. They're hoping to contain this. Okay, Joe, you're not able to escape it because they're going to keep beating the drum. So let's just go ahead and have you say that you've already admitted that there were some mistakes, and that's the end of it. After that, it's dead now. CNN won't talk about it. MSNBC won't mention it. We've already got our friends in place. They've already agreed that after that, it's dead and buried. And after that, you won't have to confront it anymore. And we go back to business as usual, except they can't. We won't let them. Or rather, I should say, you won't let them. The bad guys are feeling the heat. And what they're terrified of is that beyond punishing these white supremacists, beyond all of that is the former slaves are coming for their tangibles. And if you could not stop Kenneth Walker from having to have the charges dropped, if you could not stop Joe Biden from being held accountable for his sins, then what hope in hell do you have to stop the survivors of slavery in America from getting what's theirs? And all the Simone Mammy Sanders and all the Charlamagne, the frauds, and all the rest of the fakers, frauds, phonies, and fools that you got on the payroll, you can bring in as many Corinne Jean Pierres as you want. You can have as many Joy Reids singing your praises as you want. The problem is we have made it where you have to have this as part of the discussion. Everybody's talking about it. You have no choice but to. You black people are staying home from the polls. They're listening to this. You got no choice but to confront it. But the second that you confront it, you sink yourself. And everything you say just makes it worse. But I want you to understand, notice how the white media, they're getting on code about this. Okay, CNN did their CYA piece where they pointed out, hey, that was the states. The states had to be bribed. Joe Biden's 94 crime bill was a bribe. You can't just dodge it by saying that the states were the ones locking black people up. Yeah, but who was bribing the states to do it? They only did it because the 94 crime bill offered them $13 billion if they did it. But you didn't see Charlamagne bringing that up. That's clearly going to be their strategy. Their strategy is going to be, well, we're just not going to mention that anymore. If Joe Biden says it was the states, why? We're going to play along with it. We're going to, if we think we can get away with it, we'll just play along with it and say, well, it's largely the states. It wasn't federal. The incarcerations weren't happening at the federal level. It was happening at the state level. We won't bring up that Joe Biden offered the states $13 billion if they changed their laws and got in line with what he wanted. We're not going to bring that up. We're going to play along with, yeah, it was the states, all right, just the states. You can't say it was federal incarceration. Why are you blaming Joe Biden for what the states did? Clearly, that's going to be their strategy. It won't work, but what else can they do? So, family, this is not the time for us to be taking a bow. This is not the time for us to be resting on our laurels. We got the bastards on their heels, and their black bootlicks are not able to do anything for them. It's just making more and more problems for them. But this is not just a matter of humiliating Joe Biden. This is a matter of punishing our enemies and getting everything we're owed with interest. And that doesn't fall to any of the black bootlicks to do. That falls to you and me.